Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Drawing Room Experts. This is your host Navaid Siddiqui, and it's been a while that I haven't done this kind of an episode. It's been a long time, and today it's gonna be about another movie, and the movie in question is the recently released Dune. And with me to discuss the film, I have once again with me Mr. Ali Sattar, and it's almost been a year. It's been a while. Ali bhai, how have you been? How's everything?
Hello, Navaid. I'm good. It's been busy and it's been quite hectic this year, and I can't believe
Mhm.
we went almost an entire year without doing an episode. But it's good to
Yeah,
be on the show, and it's good to be talking to you, man. You tell how you been.
good. Just been a busy year, to be honest. Like a lot of stuff happening in the family, work-wise too, and with COVID and everything, it's just been pretty hectic. But finally, things are settling down, even in here in the U.S. So, um, just been busy
Yeah,
with work, watching movies, shows, the usual. But it's been good. How about that?
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, same, pretty much on the same lines.
Hmm.
I've been working on something that almost took my last year. I've been working on something long format narrative, 45 minutes,
Oh, Zabardast.
uh, potentially a series. We have shot the pilot for it,
Oh,
and
amazing. That.
the pilot is done, and now we are actually in the process of pitching it to corporates,
Oh,
and pretty exciting stuff, man. And
that's awesome.
it's something on the lines of uh, surreal mystery thriller
Hmm.
anthology. So each episode is going to be a different story.
Oh, Zabardast. That's always a fun project. I think anthologies are always great. And are you targeting just the Pakistani producer? Are you trying to target other media outlets too, like
But
Netflix and
we
stuff?
are trying anything that is, first of all, has
That's
the
yeah,
appetite for
makes
something
sense.
like this. Yeah, have has the appetite to make something, commission something like this coming out from Pakistan, because अभी तक
Mm-hmm.
इस तरह की कोई बनी नहीं है. And
Good.
at the same time, we also don't want to compromise on the quality and the integrity of the product.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's true.
yeah, it's pretty interesting, and I really hope that it gets picked up soon so that we can share
Inshallah.
it. I can't wait, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, inshallah, it's gonna go great. And knowing you, and I've seen your work. Inshallah, it's definitely gonna be
Thank
doing good.
you,
I'm
thank
excited. I can't wait to see, whenever you're ready to show what it is, and that's really exciting.
thank you so much. Thank you.
Perfect. So, Dune. I mean, what a movie! Like,
Oh
I
man,
yeah.
exactly. And to be honest, this is something that I've been really looking forward to. I'm a huge
Hmm.
Denis Villeneuve fan,
Yeah, he's
and since the first film that I saw of his, I think it was Prisoners, probably.
oh, yes,
I think
prisoners.
it's
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And I've been a fan of his, you know, aesthetic sense in terms of
Hmm.
that, less is more, and he does a lot of work, which is in the undertones and the subtleties of the narrative,
Yeah,
where you have to figure things out, and he plays a lot with, especially in the film. I mean, there
enemy.
there is a enemy, yeah, enemy,
Yeah, yeah,
one of my
yeah.
favorite films.
Hmm.
He deals with a lot of magical realism, and magical realism
Yes.
is sort of my thing. In fact, the series that I'm working on also has a bit of
Oh, that's
uh,
amazing.
elements of magical realism in it. So
Oh, awesome. That's nice.
yeah, so Dennis is हमारे मोहतरम उस्ताद जी हैं हमारे लिए तो. So
Yeah, he specializes in that, especially in, like, as you said, right, with his films, as and the symbolisms that he has, and a lot of the what he shows is left for interpretation, which I love. Like, especially enemy may, right? If you see all that symbolism with the spiders and everything, that's just, there's a lot for you, for the audience themselves, to figure out what's happening in the film. And it's I love when directors do that, where they let audiences figure out stuff, and the images that they put up to speak for themselves. Yeah, so yeah, I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about.
Enemy, and even in Arrival, I mean, the
Yeah,
way,
Arrival is a brilliant film. One of my
yeah,
favorites from, like, one of my favorite alien films, I'd say. Like, that was like an alien film done right.
yeah, and at the heart of it, I don't think even it is an
Yeah,
alien
yeah,
film.
yeah. That's
The
true.
heart of it is about a person going through some
Mm-hmm.
major revelation and discovering something within themselves that they did not know they were capable of.
Capable of, yeah.
So and the relationship with the daughter, and the relationship with themselves, and the relationship
Mm.
with time itself. So I think
Yeah,
it's much more than an alien film. And if
yeah,
you look at the
definitely.
run, you know, uh, the way I look at it, the alien thing is sort of like a subplot
Subplot, yeah,
for what is
definitely.
actually
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
the crux of the story. So
Mm.
yeah, Dennis, मुर्शिद जो हैं हमारे वो बड़े इस मामले में अच्छा. By the way, can we speak bilingual, or we strictly
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to
yeah,
stick
yeah.
to?
It's okay. Yeah, speak bilingual. It's okay.
अच्छा, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when I heard that he was going to make Dune, and even though I haven't read the book, I actually am starting to read the book
Oh, great. That's
from
nice.
like I started the book 2 days ago.
Oh,
But
I heard it's a pretty
yeah,
big book too. So.
yeah. It is. It is
Mhm.
pretty dense, and has like 5 volumes.
Oh wow.
And yeah, but I think the movie is just based on the first one, the first book.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty excited because I had heard that this is something that it was famous, that this is that sort of a book that cannot be filmed. That
Mm.
that cannot be condensed into a movie. And
Movie.
David Lynch did that,
Yeah,
and
he tried.
he tried. And I mean,
I mean,
when
he
he
made
made
it
it,
in when, like, 65,
it no,
85,
1983 or
83.
84,
Yeah, yeah. No,
84.
the book was 65. The movie was 83, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the book came out. So yeah,
Yeah.
and David Lynch, being a very prolific
Mm.
filmmaker,
Oh yes.
I mean, he still is, but उस ज़माने में तो,
I mean, yeah,
you know,
yeah. उस
yeah,
जमाने
yeah,
में what he
and
did was still pretty good,
yeah,
considering what what he had.
Christopher
Yeah.
Nolan, he was like the Christopher Nolan of that time,
Exactly.
if that analogy makes sense. But
Mm.
yeah, and he was like, his work with Razorhead, and he was his, uh, you know, surrealism के ऊपर उनकी काफी
Mm.
ग्रास्प थी. तो खैर,
Yeah. Yeah.
without going too much into that, but I was
Mm-hmm.
very excited. And the the I've seen the film twice. And
Yeah.
the first time I saw it, I was in Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
And over there, I wanted to see the film in IMAX, but
IMAX. Yeah.
sadly, it was all booked. So I watched it
Mm-hmm.
in a regular theater,
Mm-hmm.
and I was blown away by the visuals and the sound and the music and the sound design, because the film opens with these throat singing,
Yeah.
very
Yeah. The
deep
hymns. Yeah. Yeah.
sounds, and it is sort of a voiceover that I think उसके नीचे कुछ लिखा हुआ आता है कि dreams
Are from
come
the
from
deep. No. Yeah. The dreams are messages from the deep.
messages from the deep. So,
Yeah.
and so the first thing that you hear is sound.
Yeah.
So this is a very deliberate choice that directors make. And Kubrick used to do that
Mm-hmm.
uh, with a lot of his films that the film
Yeah.
used to open with sound.
Sound. Yeah.
You know, 2001 Space Odyssey की I think
Oh
शुरू का
yeah. Mm-hmm.
1 minute जो है वो is just sounds.
Sound. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Exactly.
so the,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very deliberate choice. The reason
Mm-hmm.
filmmakers do that is that when you're sitting inside a theater, so they're preparing you for a world building that is going to invite you and overwhelm you in a way that that should take over your entire sense of
Yeah.
space. कि आप जहाँ बैठे हुए हैं, imagine that you are now in that world.
Yeah.
And the people who have seen Dune on IMAX 3D, they actually say that it's the way it's shot, it's so immersive that you actually feel that you are in
Within
that
that
world.
world. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So शुरू में, from the very first frame, you get this sense of impending doom कि कुछ
Mm-hmm.
होने वाला है. It's a
Yeah.
very intense feeling.
Yeah.
And then the very first images that you see is of Arrakis, this sand planet,
Yeah.
which is also called Dune, because
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing on it except for sand.
Yeah.
So that frame just takes you in and prepares you of what is about to come.
Yeah. It sets the
And
tone really well for the whole film, I
this,
think. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think what we can do is, before we start off with the film, because the film heavily relies and takes elements from what was happening in the world when Frank Herbert, the American writer who wrote
Yeah.
the book Dune
The book.
in
Mm-hmm.
1964 or 1965, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I think it was
तो उस वक्त
65.
के जो हालात थे, वो I think they also inspired him to write this science fiction epic, which borrows elements of politics,
Yeah.
religion, philosophy.
Yeah. There's a
You
bit of
know,
everything in there.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and trade and global politics and
Yeah.
greed and religious exploitation, all of that.
I think the
And
वही जो oil वाला जो पूरा
mm,
उस जमाने में था, he's basically replaced oil with water, right? He's imagined a world where water is the most
mm,
like
mm,
one of the most scarce resources, and you know, yeah, exactly, like what was going on around that time as well. We see
yeah,
influences. Hmm.
yeah, yeah. And uh, I was reading up that his main inspiration started from that OPEC started in I think 1960 or 61, I think.
Hmm.
And the main reason for the establishment of OPEC was that all the oil producing countries in the world should come together on a platform where they should be deciding the prices of oil,
Yeah.
the most sought after commodity in the world. And that was considered as a threat to the West,
Yeah.
who because the majority of the countries that produced oil are in Middle East,
At least. Yeah.
and that was seen as something that could disrupt the hegemonic order of the West, that they have to rely on the Middle East to get something which is extremely necessary, that without it they cannot function.
Yeah.
So I think the main parallels when the movie opens, that the first thing that you see are these Harkonnen ships
Yeah.
landing on Dune, and there are and by the way, if you're listening by now, everything you hear is a spoiler. So if you haven't seen the film,
Oh yeah,
please,
yeah, yeah. You we have to give
yeah,
that
we have way
heads
past
up.
that point, but like an
Yeah.
official disclaimer. So the first thing that you see is these Harkonnen ships, and they are, about to harvest uh, that spice. It's called melange, which is the
Mm-hmm.
most
Sought out.
sought
Mhm.
sort of substance in the universe,
Mm.
because the spice is used by these navigators who use it to for space travel. And
Perfect. Yeah.
without the space travel is not possible,
Possible. Yeah.
because the spice has certain properties that it gives you awareness, and it's also a psychedelic sort of a substance, and it
Mm-hmm.
also gives you the ability to have premonitions of the future and stuff. So basically, this planet, which is all sand, has this the most valuable substance on the planet,
Yeah.
and this spice is being harvested by a very powerful house in the Galactic Empire called the Harkonnen House, and
Mhm.
they are put there on this planet on the orders of the Emperor, and they face resistance by the native population of the planet, who are known as the Fremen.
Fremen. Yeah.
And Fremen are the indigenous people of Arrakis, and they live in these cave-like structures,
Mm.
and I think those structures are called sieges, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah. Sieges. I think.
And yeah, and the similarities between the Fremen and the people who live in Middle East are very,
Very.
very,
Yeah.
very apparent, and unka
Mm-hmm.
libas, or unka,
Yeah, even
even the
even the skin tone, like if you like, even in the book, they were mentioned as having, brown skin and, just made to look a lot like the people from the Middle East. So
yeah,
that was a heavy influence. Yeah.
yeah, 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 and it's from the very first scene. It's very apparent that it's clearly a parallel to what is happening
Happening. Yeah,
in the
and
world.
whoever's basically in charge of harvesting melange has everything. Right, they're the
Yeah,
strongest at that point, so which kind of parallels to, again, uh, black gold, right, oil, at that time. And so,
yeah,
yep, you see those parallels as well.
yeah, and the not only that, there's a heavy influence of Islam in the book
Oh
and in the
yes, names as well, like a lot of the
name,
names. And yeah.
language,
Mm-hmm.
the Arabic words that are used in the film.
Yeah.
Uh, they are heavily inspired by some of the religious elements in Islam.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, that's very interesting, because introducing such concepts in 60s
Yeah.
to you know an American reader audience, where there were already so many misconceptions about the Middle East,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, as we know that Middle East has always been vilified from
Yeah.
the American perspective in one way or the other, because that's what you do once once you want to uh, pillage someone's resources. The first thing that you do is remove empathy. You vilify them. So uh, that's exactly what is happening on Arrakis as well. That
Yeah.
Fremen are always shown in the light that they're savages, that they are uncivilized,
Yeah.
and they're backward, and they're not trustworthy, and they're primitive cave
Mm.
dwellers. And there's also sort of a derogatory remark in the film that
Yeah.
and the Duke asks one of his commanders that what is saying over here, and he goes like, if you want to take a shower, you have to scrub your ass with sand.
Yeah.
So because and that derogatory remark was not lost on me, because the West has always used the word sand monkeys for people living in the Middle East.
Yep.
So I think that was also an illusion that how the powerful house of Atreides looks down upon the people of Arrakis.
Yeah.
Uh, and that irony comes later in the film that we will discuss later. Yeah. So basically, I think now that we have talked about the background of the film and the book, I think
Hmm.
let's start off with the movie step by step. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go for it.
So, once we establish that what is happening on Arrakis, we are taken directly into the plot where you know the the house Atreides, which lives on I think Caladan. That's
Yeah,
the name of the planet,
I think so.
Caladan.
As far as I remember, yeah.
Yeah. So, and they are being ordered by the
The
emperor.
Emperor. Yeah.
They should now be the caretakers of the planet Arrakis, and they will be harvesting the spice.
Hmm.
And we see that the emperor has sent his representatives, and amongst them is also an old lady dressed in complete black. At this point, we don't know who this lady is, but as the film
Seems to be
progresses
very
further,
important. Yeah.
yeah, find out that she not only is a very important character, but also plays a very keen role in driving the narrative forward.
Yeah.
So, the House Atreides, as honorable as they are, they agree to the call of the Emperor and they officially sign the document. And we find out that the Duke is preparing his son, his only son, Paul,
Mm.
uh, to be his successor. There is a sense of, you know, it seems that the Duke has some idea that he is being sent to a planet which poses a lot of threat, and it could
Yeah.
be something that can challenge the, the position of their house.
And
So he,
I think another thing that he really shows on purpose is the stark difference to the
Mhm.
basic landscape of a trade. The what's
Yeah,
the planet's name? I think Arrakis, right? For
yeah,
yeah, the how like completely opposite it is from where they're going, right? Their life is gonna basically flip
yeah.
do a complete 180 because it's like the Arrakis is completely, with mountains and these beautiful valleys and oceans, and then you have Dune,
Trade
like it's
is,
just a whole big mass of sand.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
another. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
that,
one more thing I think we should also mention is like when they before this they also introduce a very important aspect of the film, which is the visions
hmm,
that Paul has,
yeah,
because that's the very first, like me not knowing anything about the story, or I haven't seen the previous movie as well. So the opening line of the film, right, where it says dreams are the messages from the deep, right?
hmm,
And then the protagonist, the first thing that we see is actually some visions that he has while he's
hmm,
sleeping, right? And for me that kind of connected right away
hmm,
with the very first line that was said at the
hmm,
opening of the film, that dreams are a messages from the deep. And I was like, okay, so this has to do some with something else. These are not just visions or dreams. This is actually something connecting, and what that deep is, that's left up for us to find out as the movie progresses. I think that's another thing that was really important at the start of
yeah,
the film.
because it gives us a direct insight of, first of all, it introduces us to the protagonist,
Hmm.
and secondly, it introduces us to the struggle that the protagonist is going through because And then again, there's this religious symbolism that if people are aware of it, that uh, there's a thing in screenplay writing is called the hero's journey. So
Mm-hmm.
the first thing that is part of the hero's journey is that he is either being introduced, or either he is being pushed, or either he is being instigated to his call to journey. And over here, the call to his journey are his dreams.
Yeah.
And the very first thing that we see is that he is sitting on the table with his mother, and he mentions the dreams. And the first thing that she sort of asks him is to use the voice. And the voice is basically, in order to describe what the voice is, Paul's mother belongs to this sisterhood called the Bene Gesserit.
Spending Jesuit. Yeah.
Yeah, Bene Gesserit. This word is also derived from Arabic. Beni, as in bunny, जिस तरह कहते हैं
Bunny.
Bani
Yeah.
Israel.
Bunny is right.
Bani
Yeah.
Israel. So it means that the house of, yeah,
Jesuit. Yeah.
family of. So Beni Gesserit means and Gesserit का मैं देख रहा था कि it
Mm-hmm.
means uh, jizr. It comes from the Arabic word jizr, and it means,
Mm-hmm.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, bridge, or
Okay.
a link of some sort. So,
Okay. Jesuit. Oh
uh,
yeah, makes sense. Just okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so if you roughly translate it, so it
The
means
house of connections,
the
basically.
house that links things
Mm.
together, or the house that builds bridges.
Bridges. Yeah.
So the purpose of this secret society of,
Order. Yeah.
and it's all women. It's a
Yeah.
sisterhood of women, and there are no men in it. That
Mm.
they have certain supernatural abilities,
Mm.
and they not only practice but learn and transfer these abilities to their members. And another important role that the Bene Gesserit play in the in the empire, galactic empire, is that they also are in connection with the empire, with the emperor.
Emperor. Yeah.
And they also very carefully uh, interbreed in different um, family bloodlines.
Yes. Mm.
And we later find out that what is the reason for this careful breeding of bloodline, and it's referred in the movie that they planned 1,000 years in advance.
Yeah. It's like
So very calculated, very secretive, very deep state kind of an organization, or a sisterhood, to be precise, that operates in the shadows. And then again, the symbolism is over here is of deep state that
yeah.
works in the real world as well. So Paul's mother is part of Bene Gesserit, and they have this ability where they can manipulate people to do whatever they want by using the voice.
Sort
And
of a mind
Paul's
control.
mother, yeah, sort of mind control.
Mm.
And Paul's mother has been teaching Paul to use the voice to manipulate. And the very first thing that we see is that on breakfast table, she is asking Paul to use the voice, which he sort of does, but fails because he's still learning.
Learning. Yeah.
So, from the very get go, the film introduces us to what is happening, who is
Mm-hmm.
the protagonist, and there's also not only the protagonist, but the protagonist's mother also plays an important role in his journey. And we later see that now that Paul's father, the Duke, has agreed to go on Arrakis, so There are ships who are already who have been already sent to Arrakis to sort of like on fact-finding missions
Yeah,
and to
a
make contact
scout
with the
basically.
Prem. Yeah, and this is when we see Jason Momoa's character returning back from Arrakis, and we immediately find out that his character is sort of like a mentor to Paul, and not only a mentor but a very good friend and a
Close
protector
friend.
of the
Yeah.
family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he's also Paul's teacher who is teaching him combat. And because Paul is supposed to lead House Atreides, he's also being taught combat by Josh Brolin's character. I forget the name of
I
the
think
character.
was it the command? No, the commander. Oh no, I can't
Yeah,
remember.
sort of skipped my mind. I think थोड़ा सा मुश्किल सा नाम था.
हाँ वो
Uh,
इस फिल्म में ज्यादातर मुश्किल ही नाम थे इंक्लूडिंग द
yeah,
डायरेक्टर्स
yeah,
नेम
yeah, yeah. If the first time you watch the film, actually, it's very difficult to, you know,
keep a track.
remember the
Yeah.
yeah, remember the name of the characters and stuff. So we find out that he is not only being trained in supernatural abilities by his mother, he's also being trained in the
Hand to hand
command of his
combat.
father by
Mm.
two very powerful warriors. And over there, Brolin character tells Paul that you have to fight like a warrior because I've fought the Harkonnens and they're brutal.
Yeah,
And if you were in combat, you wouldn't stand a chance. And I think by
he kind of
that time
senses
we
something going on too. Like I think his character kind of knew that they were, stepping into something that's
yeah
not going to be
yeah
pleasant for them.
yeah. The overall mood of the film is that there is a sense of impending doom कि कुछ होने वाला है.
Yeah.
And that is beautifully complemented by this amazing score by Hans Zimmer.
Oh,
And I think this is the right time to discuss the auditory experience
it's
that you
just
feel once
brilliant.
you're in the cinema. Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
you know that a movie like Hans Zimmer is gonna do an amazing job when he rejects Christopher Nolan for a different project. So, so yeah, because if he's saying no to Christopher Nolan to do Dune, he's gonna come up with something amazing, and that's exactly what he did. He's like, from what I was reading, Denny, he had been wanting to make the film since he was 14 when he first read the book, and
Yeah.
when he approached Hans Zimmer, and he was like, I've always been a big fan of the film, and I wanted to score Dune forever, and now, he was like, yeah. So he just said no to Nolan and did this, and I am so glad that he did because the score is just
Yeah.
mind blowing.
Yeah. It scores mind blowing, and
Oh,
you
design be
know,
sound design be.
yeah. Oh, the overall sound, the overall
Hmm.
auditory experience is just
Yeah,
completely overwhelming. And मैंने जब I recently saw it in Karachi the second time,
yeah.
and this time I was sitting much closer to the screen, and that was on purpose because the first time that I saw it in Moscow, मैं थोड़ा सा
Hmm.
पीछे बैठा हुआ था.
Okay.
So I think कुछ sound का issue था, तो मुझे वो इतनी sound, you know,
Wasn't exact.
attract.
Yeah,
It wasn't that loud. And I
yeah.
was watching an interview of Hans Zimmer,
Hmm.
and he exactly said the same thing that if you want to experience Dune in its entirety, then you need to have bigger speakers,
Speakers,
and
yeah.
you need to be in a theater that is properly properly equipped to give you that experience because
Experience,
he
yeah.
designed the whole sound on on the protocols of Dolby Atmos, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
technology where the sound is much more richer and it's
Oh yes, yes.
multi-directional
Dolby
and it
Atmos
comes.
is just amazing. I've seen a few movies
Yeah,
with Dolby Atmos, and it's just a whole different experience.
yeah, and it's a very immersive experience to invite the viewer into this world. And I think especially with this film, I think 60% of the emotions that you feel is because of the music and the sound design.
Absolutely.
Because
I
Hans
agree.
Zimmer has done, like always, an amazing job. And I was, reading up his interview that he had designed themes for not only each house and each character, but he had also designed themes that would overlap once those two characters would interact.
Interact, yeah.
And
With that.
yeah, yeah, and that is something that you don't notice the first time you watch the film, but the
Mm,
second time you notice, when you watch, you notice that there is a very subtle thing going on where he's playing with your mind,
yeah.
or rather instigating emotions, which where even you're not aware of that. Why am I feeling like this? Because
Mhm.
it completely overwhelms you, and there's a theme of each. I mean, for example, on when we are on planet Caladan,
Mhm.
the theme of house is Israelis is very conventional. It's
Yeah.
very conventional in a sense कि बड़े उसमें conventional instruments use हुए हुए हैं.
Yep.
But when you see the Harkonnens, it's very
Mhm.
drum like, और उसमें बड़ी वो जो एक tribal uh,
Warrior sort of.
warrior
Uh,
war drum like quality है, and you
yeah.
hear these drums beating, and when you see the Bene Gesserit, it's always whispering sounds, and
Yeah. It's a very, yeah,
it's a very
supernatural.
eerie, supernatural, eerie
Yeah.
sound that you hear,
Yeah.
and it sort of puts you in that space that it's sort of preparing you that the characters or the visuals that you see on
Mhm.
screen, they have their own significance in a way.
Yeah.
And I
This
think majority of the time, I think the sound is driving the narrative forward, which
That's what I
is
loved
quite,
about this film. Like,
yeah,
I love the fact that Villeneuve was not, he didn't spoon feed everything to the audience, right? From
yeah,
including the whole background of families. Like, he didn't go too deep in it.
yeah,
He gave us enough for us
mm,
to kind of extrapolate, whatever we can figure out what kind of a family, or a certain family is, just through the music, just through this little dialogues that he's provided us, right? And that's what I loved about this. Like, you get the sense of what kind of a family this is, or what kind of a planet this is, just by what's being shown and what's being heard by the audience, which is such a
yeah,
brilliant way to bring a world to life.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And uh, the best part about it is that once there is a scene in the beginning, and we might be jumping back and forth, but
No, no,
since
that's
we are
fine.
talking
Yeah.
about sound, there's a scene when uh, I think the guy who is sort of the Baron's uh,
Oh,
commander or
the
something. The thin, slender-looking guy.
yeah,
He
yeah, yeah.
is visiting the Sadhu card. They are the Emperor's army, and over there we hear this throat singing kind of a sound, and
I think
we
it's
later
it's
find out
वो कहाँ से होता
that's
है?
how they speak.
वो I think it's inspired by the
Mongolian, I think.
Mongolian, yeah, Mongolian chant जो होता है.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
वो
Mongolian throat singing.
राम, क्या है वो नाम जो Ringekure, the whole chant, that's what it reminded me of. The yeah, so
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. And it's very powerful, the sound
it
that,
is, it is, and I think it starts off with that. The movie starts off with that
starts off
chant.
with, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it starts with that as well. So
kind of tells. Go ahead.
it sort of tells you that because they are known to be the emperor's army,
hmm
and they're very powerful and they're very skillful and they're very brutal warriors. So the language that they speak is also very guttural and it's also very,
Mm-hmm.
you know, overpowering, overwhelming kind of a
Mm-hmm.
language that they speak.
Sounds very harsh
So,
too.
yeah, sounds very harsh, and it also gives you view that what kind of people they are because sound
Yeah,
is giving you much more information because आपके पास time कम है, so
exactly.
it's also a very good way for exposition through sound, which is a very intelligent use of
Mm-hmm.
sound design.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the overall experience of sound is done brilliantly.
Oh yes,
So
absolutely. Brings a whole
yeah,
new
so I think
uh, layer to it.
go on.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
You were saying something.
No, no. I just said it just adds a whole new layer to the whole storytelling formula, right? It's just so well done. I think they nailed the
Yeah,
sound, music, everything.
yeah. So once we are introduced to these characters, we are introduced to the character of the Baron Harkonnen, who is the leader of the House Harkonnen, and he
Mm.
is played by uh,
Stellan
Stellan
Skarsgård. Yeah,
Stellan Skarsgård, जो हाँ Alexander के वालिद हैं, Alexander Skarsgård के, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken.
yeah.
Yeah, brilliant actor,
Oh yes,
and
he's Swedish, right? He's
he
done a few Swedish films as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think a perfect choice
Oh yes.
to showcase a
I.
villain that is not only formidable but is
Mm.
also very powerful, and he is this huge guy, who's extremely fat. And the first reveal of that character is that
Mm.
he is in a steam bath or he's taking steam,
Yeah, yeah,
and he has a bald head and this huge meaty hand full of fat, you
yeah,
know, वो उसके bald head से नीचे आता है. And if there are any Apocalypse Now fans listening
yeah.
to this,
Exactly. It was exact. I was just gonna say that it's exactly like Marlon
yeah,
Brando, right? So it
yeah,
was. It was basically an Easter egg. There are like a couple of scenes of his that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
kind of reflect Apocalypse Now. But yeah.
Yeah. So that is a direct homage to Marlon Brando's character, and
Mm.
I think I was reading up on it that uh, the makeup artist who
Designed
made
this.
this entire
Yeah.
design look of Baron Harkonnen.
Mm-hmm.
His inspiration was also Marlon Brando from
Right. Yeah.
Apocalypse Now. That this very
Mm-hmm.
powerful character who is always in the shadows. We never see Baron Harkonnen in like broad daylight. उसके
Yeah.
जितने भी scenes हैं, he's always shown in shadows. His
Yes.
face is either partially revealed or his face is
Yeah.
partially
It's.
lit, but at
Oh,
the same time you cannot make out, and he has these deep black eyes, very
yeah.
powerful eyes that are not only conveying the ruthlessness of this
The
villain,
character.
but they also convey the control, the kind of control, the kind of dominance this character demands in a frame. And I think Stellan just played it beautifully. I mean,
Oh,
it gives
absolutely.
you chills when you see him on screen,
Yeah.
and especially when he levitates in the air and he says,
Oh
"My
yeah.
Arrakis, my Dune," and he's floating in the air because he has this anti-gravity device on his back,
Mm.
and it's just a very powerful image and
Yeah.
gives
The
you
whole
the
that whole
scale.
image is very. It is.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So by this time, we are introduced by all the main characters,
Mm.
and we see that the House Atreides is landing on Arrakis in their huge ships. And over here, a little nod to the production design. I really like the idea of spaceships that don't look anything like we have seen
Yeah.
spaceships film.
Mm.
They're very blocky and they're very chunky, and it almost looks like a Soviet era architecture. The
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know the architecture of brutalism, and they
Mm-hmm.
look like blocks and chunks rather than elegant design spaceships that we
Yeah,
are not
yeah.
accustomed to seeing in sci-fi films. So
Mm.
this is something that I really like, and you get to see the scale of the ships, that how huge they are when
Yeah, yeah, that's humongous.
the people emerge from them. And as soon as they emerge, we see that uh, the indigenous people of Arrakis, uh, they are dressed in something that exactly looks like a burqa,
Yeah,
and they look exactly like how people in the Middle East would dress up, and that's the first parallel, visual parallel that you see as
yeah,
Zordanians. Uh, they are also repeating the same word again and again in Arabic. Uh,
yeah. What
and
was
what
that?
was that? Explain, I think.
It was Shai Hulud?
No, 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 no.
Oh,
They talk.
that's the yeah.
That's the worm. Uh,
Hmm.
I think they're talking about Paul's name for the, which is they're talking about the prophecy that
Yeah,
there
yeah,
will
yeah, yeah. I can't
they,
exactly. I
they,
know
they,
what
yeah, मेरे भी
mm,
जहन से वो लफ्ज निकल गया
निकल
खैर.
गया. Yeah, exactly. I'm like I have it in
Yeah,
my
it's all
mind मगर आ नहीं रहा अभी.
exactly. So
Hmm.
खैर they're chanting these words in Arabic, which means that the prophecy is about to be fulfilled, that a savior or a messiah
Hmm.
will come, that will, liberate the people of Arrakis from oppressors, because Arrakis has been a place where oppressors come and go.
Yeah,
And we later find out in the film that that has been the case. First, it was Harkonnens, and now the House Atreides is there to
yeah,
replace Harkonnens, and that's what the people see. The Duke as, they see him as another oppressor,
yeah,
and we see that they come. They're greeted by the military commander who is already on the planet, and he takes Paul and Paul's mother in a helicopter, like
which is a
an
really cool
aircraft.
design again. Yeah,
Really, really cool. It looks like a
dragonfly.
uh, dragonfly. Yeah,
Yeah,
and so we see that
and
you
since we were
know,
talking about parallels, right? I think the savior that these guys mention is also called Mahdi.
yeah.
So
But
that's
this
another.
term, yeah, but this term is used later in the film.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
word made. Uh, but Paul's asking what they're saying, and the mother replies that they're talking about you, the
Mm,
savior, and she immediately says the Bene Gesserit have been at work over here, which is a nod that because Bene Gesserit operate from the shadows, and they also manipulate information, and they also
yeah,
you know uh, maintain the status quo in the Imperium. So they have probably been here as well, training the Fremen about the arrival of this supposed savior or messiah.
savior. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and वहाँ से फिर आगे चलते हैं, and we see the first aerial shots of the planet, the desert planet, and the vastness of the desert,
Mm,
and we later see that where the house is residing, and there's a lot of problems with the
yeah,
infrastructure,
the
the
machines
equipment that
have.
has, the
Yeah,
machines are faulty, and there's obviously a challenge that they have to face in order to harvest the spice. And we later find out that Paul is learning about the planet, and he's learning about the Fremen, and he's learning about the ecology of the planet and the wildlife. And we see that there is a small uh, mosquito like uh, uh, drone, I would say, that
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that is
Spy
kill
drone,
him.
basically.
That is
Mm-hmm.
spy drone. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and we later find out that there was a Harkonnen already in the walls that was controlling the drone,
The drone, yeah.
and
So they're already trying to assassinate
yeah, already trying to assassinate Paul.
Paul, yeah.
And this is where we see that the shit is getting real. And
I know.
yeah, yeah, and the Duke is furious. He commands his head of military to find out what is happening, and he decides to meet the person who has been left in charge of all the operations. And
Mhm.
I think she is the ecologist who is.
Ecologist, and I think like in the book, it was a male, and they
Yeah,
changed the character to a female in the film.
yeah, yeah, and a female black woman
Yes, yeah. I think
also.
I think one more thing we should also mention is the the, the visions that Paul has. A lot of them has this girl that is this character which is played by Zendaya, right? And I
Mhm.
think most of the visions till then are of her, him being with her, right?
Yeah,
At till
yeah,
that point.
yeah. Yeah, that is
So
also. Sorry, continue.
नहीं मैं वही कह रहा था कि that they're like they're doing it for a purpose, I guess, to just to introduce her character too, because it seems to be a very very important character to Paul.
Hmm.
And the visions kind of show them being romantically involved as well. So and he has no idea who she is. So, and but she is dressed as the Fremen from what we
Yeah,
see from the visions. So that is another really interesting thing that is happening as we see different visions that Paul is having throughout this whole time. But yeah, continue.
yeah, and that, I mean, now that we're talking about the visions, that is also a very interesting narrative device because Paul is seeing multiple realities,
Yeah, that was
and
that that was interesting. Like
yeah,
both in
that was
timelines.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting because it's also is being used intentionally by the director to sort of misdirect the audience as well.
The audience where
But
things can go. Yeah.
yeah, where things can go and where things are going, but somehow they change course. So
Hmm.
uh, in, in uh, the first part of the film, Paul's vision are, we are seeing the character of Chani or Shani, whatever her name is
Yeah. Yeah.
pronounced, and we just see that he is dreaming about this girl with blue eyes, and they're bare glimpses. He has no idea who this girl is,
Hmm.
but all he knows that she's a Fremen and she is from Arrakis, but he has never met her. And as Paul's vision, the frequency of his visions increases. He starts seeing more of her, and uh, then he starts seeing himself with Shani's character, that he's also with her, and they're
Yeah.
together, and they're both dressed in those Fremen suits, that are necessary to survive on Arrakis.
Yeah.
And so again, if you look at Denis Villeneuve's treatment of the narrative, he is
Hmm.
using something similar what he did in Arrival,
Yeah.
that you're seeing the past, the future, and the present at the same
Present.
time.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
true.
and this is sort of also what Paul's character Motib is supposed to be. That
Mm.
his mother Jessica tells him that if you are what we have been waiting for, then you have the power to transcend time.
Hmm.
You can not only look, but you can also operate in past, present, and future.
In the
You know,
future,
you
yeah.
can transcend time, and you can bring, uh, you know, uh, a change in
Mm.
in the Imperium and the universe, and you can bring peace. And this is something, which is a big deal,
Yeah.
because even in future, when humans have progressed and they have, you know, inhabited other planets,
Hmm.
the desire for power and the desire for people with power to be corrupted is very much similar to what they were
Similar to, yeah.
before they invented space travel and all those other things. So I think the deeper message of the film and the book is that human beings, regardless of how advanced they might become,
Get
the inherent need to possess something, or the inherent
power.
to control
Hmm.
is going to be very much there. I
Yeah.
mean, वो एक ऐसी चीज
The
है जो
basic human
हमारे
instinct.
हमारे वजूद के साथ जुड़ी हुई है, and people
Hmm.
with power will have the potential to be absolutely corrupted. So I
Yeah.
think that is something that is established throughout the story step by step, and we हमारी बात शुरू हुई थी पॉल्स के विजन से. So
Hmm.
we are seeing something, and then we later find out that that reality that Paul was seeing was not the case.
Yeah.
And खैर कहानी आगे बढ़ती है और हम planet को explore करते हैं, and we see that the ecologist immediately notices that Paul is different, and she mutters under her breath that he might be the Muaddib,
Yeah.
the name for Paul's character on Arrakis. And
Yeah.
they
The
go to
savior.
see these harvesting fields, and we see that there is a harvester there, and that's the first time we get to see a glimpse of a worm which is known as Shai Hulud
Ulud.
on the planet. And this name is used by the Fremen to
Hmm.
refer to these worms, and these worms are huge.
Yeah.
And we see this worm.
They almost like worship these things too, right? They're like,
Yeah. There is a religious element. There is this reverence uh, that is associated with these worms, and I think
yeah.
more of it will be dealt into the second part of the film.
Second part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's intentionally, missed. I mean, there is this. The, उन्होंने hint की है इस तरफ. They have
Hmm.
alluded to it,
Yeah.
but they have made it very obvious that they worship these worms.
These ones. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so that's the first time we see a huge worm advancing towards one of the harvesters, and the device that is supposed to pick harvester up from the sand dunes is faulty, and then the Duke decides that he has to get all
Is that?
these people off the ship, and this is the first time that Paul is exposed to the spice, because he gets out to save the people, and this is when he has his first sort of like a psychedelic trip,
Yeah.
when he's hallucinating on the spice, and he sees these visions, which again he sees Zendaya's character and some other characters who were Fremen, and he
Hmm.
also hears these voices from Bene Gesserit, these whispering voices, and
I think
the
that's
sort
when
of.
he sees Jamis for the first time too, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. And while he is hallucinating, he forgets that he's supposed to be back to the ship, and Josh Brolin's character comes and saves him, and puts him back into the ship. And the we see that the gradual transformation of Paul's character has now is on its peak. The
peak, yeah.
transformation has begun, and we also see that House Atreides is they're not safe on the planet, and whatever has been left on the planet is it's not good enough to harvest spice. So the Duke immediately senses that, and in the very
Yeah.
next scene, they come back. He tells Paul to be careful, and the next scene when he is talking to uh,
Yes.
Paul's mother,
Mm.
Jessica,
Hmm.
which is also we should mention that they're not married.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jessica is Duke's concubine,
Yeah.
and he later admits that he should have
Should have married
uh,
her. Mm.
married her, and he flat out asks her that you should uh, promise me that you will protect Paul, and he asks her not only as Paul's mother but as Bene Gesserit, because he knows that the Bene Gesserit, they have the power to protect not only Jessica but also by extension Paul as well.
Yeah.
And we again get this sense that he knows something is going to happen, and
Hmm.
uh, lo and behold, and the next scene we see that there's a covert operation,
Operation.
and
Yeah.
while it's nighttime and everybody's sleeping, the Harkonnens come and they,
Just wreak havoc, basically.
yeah, they just wreak havoc, and there are these huge explosions, and the shields that protect uh, you know the entire house and the people who were there, they're deactivated, and we later find out that they deactivated by one of their doctors who
Mm.
was doing it on the orders of the Baron Harkonnen.
Yeah. He's trying to save his wife, who's
Yeah,
basically
yeah,
being
held
held.
captive. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. So, खैर वहाँ से Paul and his mother are held captive, and now they're being taken into the desert while the Duke is put in sort of a comatose state where he
Yeah.
is awake, alive, but he cannot move. And this is the first time we see, that now that they've taken control and killed everyone, all the soldiers and everyone, basically the entire army of House Estratus that was on Arrakis. The Duke is lying naked, half conscious, and the Baron, uh, you know, the doctor is brought forth, and he kills him obviously because
Hmm.
he
Yeah.
had killed his wife earlier. And over there, we find out that the Duke has this tooth inside his mouth that contains this powerful poison,
Poison gas. Yeah.
and yeah, poisonous gas. And when he bites on it, everybody in the room dies, and the Baron is sort of also semi-protected because of the shield that he activates before talking to him. And but we later find out that और साथ साथ intercuts में वो scene भी चल रहे हैं where Paul and his mother are being taken out in the desert to be left alone or to be pushed off the plane rather, so that because the Baron has given words to the Bene Gesserit that he won't kill Jessica and Paul.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and over there we see that Paul for the very first time uses his power of the voice to control these Harkonnen soldiers, and later the Jessica uses that voice to kill these soldiers, and then they land in the desert, and by that time we see that the whole you know city has been pillaged, and the trees have been burned, and all whatever was there is now in shambles.
Yeah. I
And
think only
yeah,
few
and
survivors, and I think Jason
only
Momoa's character is one of the uh,
yeah,
people that survives the
yeah,
whole assault.
yeah, yeah. He's one of the few people who survives, and he immediately goes to one of the Fremen caves where he meets the ecologist, and the ecologist by this time knows. that this was something that was already planned,
But yeah.
and
Mm.
this was something going to happen, but she doesn't want the Duke and his family. But regardless of that, Jason Momoa is there, and we see Paul and his mother. They're in this sort of tent that protects them from the heat and also conceals them underneath the sand. And over there, Paul realizes that his father is dead, and now him and Jessica are like fugitives on the run, being sought by the Emperor and the army of Baron Harkonnen,
Yeah, and the
and
sandworms.
and the Sandworm. Yeah. So the hero's journey is now in full blown, यानी कि वो अपने सफर पे निकल पड़ा है,
निकल गया, yeah, now
and
it's
he has been pushed to pursue his call even if he didn't want to. And over there, that moment is fully realized that when he says that you made me a freak,
yeah,
and that is, I think, a very important scene because, like all the heroes, he must pursue this journey even if he's not ready for it, or even if he is, it's difficult for him to realize that he is the person who has to bear this immense responsibility,
yeah,
and he has sort of an emotional breakdown. And but over that emotional breakdown, I think they bond as well. So I think it's a very well crafted scene because the
oh
mother
yes,
and son are completely, they're overcome with grief, they're
yeah.
vulnerable, they're emotional. Paul is
And
going through some extreme stuff, and over there, he's also, while he's going through this emotional breakdown, he's also hallucinating
yeah,
because he's saying some things that he has to protect, the ream and all of that is
mm,
going on. It seems that he's whispering the lines what the Bene Gesserit are whispering.
yeah. And another thing with the mother son, Janka relation, another thing that that we found out through his visions, that he knew that his mother was pregnant through his
Yeah.
visions, because he saw a vision of his mother and the kid dressed as the Fremen with blue eyes. He saw that
Mm.
vision, and that's how he knew that his mom was pregnant, and he confronts her about that too. So that was another thing, that added to the whole, the relationship of the son and the mother. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that was a really nice dimension to it too.
Yeah. 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 And not only that, I mean, he sees himself
Hmm.
as someone who one day might be leading, the
Yeah, there's a
Fremen.
whole fight sequence, and he sees himself on the battlefield, and we see him
Yeah.
fighting
Yeah.
against
Yeah.
the Harkonnens, and he himself has blue eyes. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
this
And
vision.
he's dressed in this kick-ass Iron Man-like suit.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. That.
Again, another thing about the movie, just the design, the costume design, the production design was just beautiful.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely beautiful, and something that that we have never seen before,
Mm-hmm.
and something that is unconventional to sci-fi films because in most of the sci-fi films it's very shiny and very
Yeah, yeah.
metallic,
And
but over here in Dune everything is made of fabric and it's very worn
yeah,
out and it's very rough.
I think
It's very
one big
lived in.
reason is the lack of AI in this world. From what I read, that there are no computers. If you notice,
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
zero
Yeah.
computers in this world and in this universe. So that's a very interesting aspect, and I think that's also reflected by, as you said, the costumes and everything. So it's kept to the very basics, but it's still every house and every family is in their own way distinctive as well. So it's a really nice mashup of fiction and sticking to the basics.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. definitely. And the reason there is no eye because in the background of that story is that once humanity had advanced so much that they had these intelligent
Beings.
thinking machines that made things worse for them, and there was a huge war, and after the war all the machines that had the capability of being self-aware were completely banned, and even though
मतलब
there
इस
are computer technology that exists, the
हम्म
technology is not capable of AI. Uh, the
मतलब
humans
इस यूनिवर्स में ट्रांसफॉर्मर्स खत्म हो चुके
हम्म ट्रांसफॉर्मर्स के साथ उनकी लड़ाई हो चुकी है, उनका फटा हो
हैं
चुका है, और उन्होंने कहा है कि भाई अब तुम्हारे साथ हमारा कोई लेना देना नहीं है, फ्रेंडशिप ब्रोक ट्रांसफॉर्मर्स, हमारी
yeah
नई दोस्ती स्पाइस के साथ.
spice के
So
साथ yeah it's a good way to
so
put it
yeah, even the navigators who travel in space, they rely on the spice to
spice yeah
navigate.
mm.
They do not have computers or AI technology that is capable of navigating these ships in space. So
Mm.
another aspect where the the universe of Dune is very different from the rest of the sci-fi films that rely
yeah
heavily on uh, technology and AI to drive the narrative forward. And I was
yeah
reading that Frank Herbert in his interviews said that he writes science fiction for people who don't want to read science fiction. So that's also a
mm.
very interesting way that he put very hardcore science fiction narrative in a way that is also very easy to not easy but relatively easier to digest for people who
grasping yeah
might
yeah
be, might not be interested in reading science fiction. So
science
I think that
fiction yeah
also reflects in the visual narrative of Dune that you don't see a lot of machines except for the helicopters. Everything is very it's very believable also. The gadgets that they have,
yeah
it's
yeah
something that that we can think that it's possible to have something like that because they're very simplistic in
mm-hmm.
their design. They're very minimalistic as
yeah
as
like
as
yeah,
one can imagine.
like
So
holograms and all these things and the machines they're like things that that are easily doable and believable so
yeah,
yeah
yeah, yeah. So once Paul and the mother, they share this traumatic experience while they're in the tent. Paul emerges from the tent, and over there, I couldn't help but notice the the visual symbolism that it sort
mm-hmm.
of reminded me of in Christianity when Jesus,
yeah
after his, when he was put on the cross on the
mm-hmm.
third day or the second day, he emerges out from a cave,
cave yeah mm-hmm.
and he addressed his followers and he addressed his apostles. So when Paul emerges out from underneath the sand, it's sort of symbolic that he is rising from the dead.
Risen mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he literally comes out of the sand. So it's like he was
yeah
buried
yeah
and now he has this rebirth because now he knows that he doesn't have a father or any of the allies that protected him. It's he is on his own, and he not only has to take care of himself, he has to take care of his mother who is now pregnant.
mm.
So his responsibility is sort of doubled
Increase
now.
yeah doubled yeah for sure
Yeah, yeah,
mm.
and now we see that they sort of when they come out, they hear a helicopter, and we see that it's Jason Momoa's character who has survived, and he comes, informs them of his father's death, and pledges himself on Paul's hand as the Duke.
yeah
Uh, he, I think, gives him Paul's ring as well, or
he
he
does
already has that ring from the letter from the physician, the doctor. I'm
Mm.
forgetting. So, either ways, Paul has this ring and he wears the ring. And Jason Momoa's character takes Jessica and Paul to one of the sieges where the Fremen, live. And we later find out that they have been spotted by Harkonnen soldiers, and they pursue him. And over there, Jason fights bravely, protecting Paul. And during combat, he dies, but he buys them enough time to, escape the siege with
Yeah.
the help of the ecologist. And while Paul and his mother escape on a helicopter, we see the ecologist is trying to escape through another means, but before she manages to escape, she is killed by
Assassinate.
these soldiers, assassinated by these soldiers. And while Paul and his mother escape on a helicopter, they are being pursued by these soldiers. And Paul deliberately steers the helicopter towards an approaching sandstorm.
Sandstorm. Which was a
And the
beautiful
sandstorm, yeah,
sequence.
which looked beautiful, and again a nod to, you know the Middle Eastern desert
Middle
and
East. Yeah.
Sahara
Mm-hmm.
desert,
Mm-hmm.
where these storms occur. It's a regular occurrence over there.
Mm-hmm.
And within that storm, because the winds are, I think, even in the movie it's mentioned it's 800 miles per hour or something. So it's something like, if you enter the sandstorm, it's impossible that you would survive.
Survive. Yeah.
And, and they fire rockets at him, which I think he sort of dodges, and they're sort of driven away by these high speed winds.
Mm-hmm.
But over there, Paul is also having some visions, and he realizes that the only way he can survive this sandstorm is if he lets go of the controls. So he pulls back and he withdraws his hands from the controls. He folds the wings of this helicopter,
Mm-hmm.
and he just lets go. And the wind itself is now driving them away from danger. And it's a beautiful parallel that the more you try to gain control of a situation in a
The more
chaotic,
you lose it. Yeah.
the more you lose that control. And
Mm.
the only way to actually survive is to embrace the chaos.
Yeah.
And again, a very powerful message for the character that shown very visually. And over here I would like to address that I think the intelligence use of communicating the information visually rather than exposition
Yeah.
and dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
because I think the David Lynch film relied heavily on voiceover
Yeah.
for exposition. But over here, Denis Villeneuve completely, lets go of that decision, and I think it was a very good decision to, get rid of the voiceover completely and
Yeah.
let visual narrative take the course
Yeah.
and
An audio. Yeah.
you
For
know
sure.
tell the story forward. And I really like that part, because not only it's telling the viewer of what is happening uh, you know inside uh, the storm, but it's also telling what is happening inside Paul, that he's
Mm-hmm.
realizing something, that in order to move forward in his journey, he has to let go of every sense of control that
Yeah.
he knows.
Just embrace the
And
chaos and let it guide
yeah,
him. Basically.
yeah, and Khair, eventually they come out of the storm and they land. And when they land, they land towards I think उस वक्त तक रात हो चुकी होती है, and
Yeah.
they change their costumes. And they move in that fashion which doesn't attract the worm, but they end
The
up
whole
attracting the
chase
worm.
sequence. Yeah.
The whole chase sequence where we see the worm, this huge creature for the very first time, and we see how big it is.
Yeah.
And we see that Paul. unafraid, looks directly into this huge worm, and it seems that the worm, he's sort of subconsciously communicating with it because the worm doesn't attack.
Attack, yeah.
And it's,
Mhm.
yeah, and it's unclear whether it's Paul who is doing that, or the Fremen, that we later find out, because one of the characters says that it wasn't him, it was my thumper that sort of
Distracted the worm.
deviated,
Mm.
distracted the worm, and so here in the next scene we see that they are being
Kind of
you
like
know
ambushed by the Fremen.
ambushed. Yeah, yeah, they're being ambushed by the Fremen, and
And I think we're forgetting one important character that was actually introduced earlier in the film, which is of Javier Bardem.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Why don't you talk about that character?
Yeah, basically, I think the name was Tilgar. I think Javier Bardem's character is like the leader of the Fremen, and he kind of comes and visits the Duke before, of course, he dies. And the Duke kind of assures him that he's not gonna be like the previous people, like the Harkonnen, and he wants everything to go. He wants to work hand in hand with the Fremen and keep the peace and do what's best for both the parties. And yeah, so that was that character, the leader, is played by Javier Bardem, and he when he's meeting the Duke, he also kind of realizes when he looks at Paul that okay, he might be the savior, and I think he says a couple of things um, in their language too, right? Like we kind of like read into that he knows that he's the one basically. And
Yeah,
so yeah, and it's a very small scene of of him interacting with the Duke, and then he goes back and come forward to this scene. That's where we see him again, and he's within that whole group that is trying to ambush Paul and Jessica basically.
yeah, 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 yeah. So yeah, and over there we see that Jessica overpowers Javier Bardem's character, and he realizes that he's not dealing with a fragile woman. She is killed in combat, and that sort of builds confidence. And he invites Jessica and Paul to accompany him, but one of his companions, the black guy,
Yeah,
um,
Jamis was his name. And yeah, go ahead.
go on.
No, I was just saying that Jamis is also a very kind of a interesting and important character in the sense that we do see him in one of the visions that Paul has, but in those visions
Mm,
he actually is like in one of the visions he's acting like a mentor to him, and he's telling him what he needs to do and what he needs to be learning to survive. And then later on he has another vision where he is the character of Paul is basically killed by Samus.
mm,
So we see that they're like
mm,
two whole different scenarios that could play out, which again goes back to the different timelines, right? So and just not knowing what's going to happen and just betraying the audience in that sense. Even the audience is not able to pick up that what exactly is the right vision, and it
yeah.
turns out to be none of those are right because they have kind of like a duel.
Mm,
Jamis asks Paul for a duel against him, and because he doesn't want him to join the Fremen or be a part of their
mm,
house or being taken back to where they are. So yeah,
mm.
go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, over here, I think it's very important to mention the edit of the film. That
Yeah.
the treatment of the edit is so beautifully done that
Hmm.
while we see this very straightforward, linear narrative going on, but there are chunks of these multiple realities which we see through Paul's visions, which is also giving us insight into like we
White
discussed
domain.
earlier that yeah, I mean, what may be, but also used as a misdirection to the audience.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it's also giving us insight into Paul's head. That
Yeah,
if somebody is perceiving reality in multiple possibilities, then it's very difficult for that person to seek a sense of what is actually real
yeah,
and what is happening inside me. I mean, meri hakikat kya hai?
exactly.
What am I? And if I'm seeing things, then
Yeah, it's not
which
just the
version of
audience that's confused. Basically, it's yeah, like what we are
yeah,
seeing is his vision. So even he is not sure what's gonna happen or what is to happen, right? Because
yeah,
he's seen multiple things, so he's as confused as the audience. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And this is actually a very good, uh, you know, I really like this idea because even in even in religion, if we
yeah,
see that whenever divine information was being conveyed to prophets, it
mm-hmm.
wasn't exactly crystal clear. You
Clear
know,
enough. Yeah,
the information, the divine information, uh, always used to come in chunks,
mm-hmm.
and it was only limited information for that limited time. So it's also the concept of faith
Yeah,
that is very important. So over here, Paul is being tested. Paul is being, he's questioning himself that, what is the next step forward, while at the same time he has to be in that position of being a determined person who has to take care of his mother and himself.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's the conflict is, I think, very important to this narrative because
Yeah,
all the people who are put in that position of the Messiah or the one or the Savior. And it's exactly like, if you remember Neo's character in the Matrix, he's
yeah,
not sure if he's
mm-hmm.
the one. And at
Yeah.
some
It's
point, he,
never a straight path. It's never a clear path.
yeah,
You, yeah,
yeah, yeah. Even he says that, I'm a huge fan of the Matrix, and even I
mm-hmm.
think in the second one or the third one, he said that I don't even believe, or I don't even care that if I'm the
It's the
one or
first
not,
one.
or
Yeah, it's the first part.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. It's just that he has to do what he has to do.
Yeah,
So I think Paul is sort of in a very similar situation that I think regardless of his doubt or regardless of his multiple realities, I think he realizes that he has to move forward, and this is very. It becomes very clear when Paul defeats Shamus in the duel and he kills him with a
yeah,
crysknife.
yeah.
And
And I think another thing to mention would be like this is the first time Paul's character actually meets Shani. That was the
yeah,
first time they actually get face to face. Is the same girl that
yeah,
he's been having the visions of, and she's finally
yeah,
there. So that's also like
yeah,
a momentous moment. We like surprisingly enough, Zendaya, like she's a big actress, and the total amount of screen time for her in this whole film was 7 minutes,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
which
I
is
think they saved her character for the next one
next
because
one. I think yeah, that's what I've heard that she's gonna be a bigger, probably even the like one of the main protagonists for the whole this part
yeah,
two. But yeah, go ahead. So he has
yeah,
this whole
yeah,
fight with Jamis, and
yeah,
he ends up
yeah.
defeating
And
him.
this is the first time he ends up defeating him, and this is the first time he's killed a human being,
Someone, yeah, yeah,
someone, and he kills Shamus with a very sacred crysknife,
yeah.
and which is given to him by Zendaya's character Shani, and this is the knife he has been seeing in his visions as well.
Visions
So
as
it's an
well. Yeah.
important,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's an
So yeah.
important
Mm.
narrative device. And then Khair, eventually they are accepted by the Fremen as he is now defeated, and accepted as an equal to them because Jamis was a very
Yeah.
skilled warrior,
Yeah,
and Paul,
everyone plays the odds against Paul. Like it's like you're not gonna
yeah,
survive, so good luck with your last fight. But yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So it's basically like no question asked कि इसका तो आज आखिरी दिन है, इसको बिरयानी खिला दो और बस
Yeah,
बात
enjoy your
खत्म,
stay.
बात खत्म।
Yeah.
हाँ, तो वहां से खैर Paul and his mother are now being accepted and they're now being taken into the desert, and now we see the exact same shot of
Vision.
Shani
Mm.
looking back at Paul, and this is the exact same vision he has been having in his dreams,
Yeah,
and
I
we
think the
see
only
that from
vision that actually happened.
yeah, yeah, and the
Mm.
only vision that actually became a reality.
Reality. Yeah.
Uh, and now we see that the Fremen actually commute by riding these worms in the
That was one of
desert.
the most kick-ass
Yeah,
shots of the whole film. It was such a powerful shot where this guy is just riding this huge worm. It's like that's badass.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, yeah. And this is when he realizes that that's what his father was talking about, desert power, that
yeah,
they have to harness the power of the desert in order for houses really to
mm,
maintain, the status quo on Dune.
mm.
And this is where the film ends,
Basically,
and
yeah,
we see them going off into the distance and probably going to one of the Fremen hideouts.
right out, yeah,
And this is where the first part ends. And again, it ends on a very high note, not
yeah,
only visually, also in terms of score. And you
everything.
know,
Like I think as an audience member, you end up wanting more, and which is a brilliant thing. Where if a film ends at a point where the audience wants to see more right away, it's like you've done your
mm,
job, right? People are already looking forward to the sequel, and I think that's what he managed with the last few minutes of the film as well. So I think that was like the perfect ending.
yeah, 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 perfect ending. And I was, even after the credits start rolling, I was sitting in the cinema just completely overwhelmed by
Yeah,
what I have just witnessed. And
witness, yeah, experienced
and it's and I haven't felt like that with any other film in a very long time,
in a long time. Yeah, no,
because
I get what you mean, especially something of this magnitude, right? Like I've seen
yeah,
in indie films and foreign films that have made me feel that way, but something of this, like something from Hollywood and of this big of a budget, that was something after a very long time. I think
yeah,
something that's, yeah, made
yeah,
me feel
and
or
it's
experience this. Yeah.
yeah, and given that majority of the film post production happened during lockdown and COVID,
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's also a testament to how they got a little more time, because I was watching the interview of the editor
Yeah.
of the film, and he said that when post production began, they were in lockdown, and Denis Villeneuve worked with his longtime collaborator editor. I'm forgetting the name of the editor. Is the same guy who was who edited all of Denis's films, and
Oh
Denis
yeah.
refuses to work with the editor, and that was the first time they were not together. And Dennis and him sit in the same room and edit the film together, and they discuss it. And in his interview, he told that Dennis mentioned the film Dune when they were editing Blade Runner, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the first time Dennis mentioned that he's a huge fan of the novel, and he would like to adapt it. And that's when he suggested that his editor should read the book. And and it's a very good interview for any filmmakers who are
Mm-hmm.
listening to this podcast. And I would also suggest to you that you should definitely check
I
out
will
that interview.
definitely. मुझे
by,
do send me the
by
link.
I will. I think it's
Mhm.
it's on the YouTube channel of Frame.io.
Okay.
Frame.io
Okay.
is a service. उसके channel पे है ये interview.
All right.
And it's such a brilliant interview because as a director myself, I completely related to it. That because
Mm-hmm.
I um, work with my same editor that
Mm-hmm.
I work with, and the bond of the director and the editor, if you develop that bond, because एडिटिंग एक ऐसा प्रोसेस है जहाँ पे मेरे ख्याल से फिल्म 3 दफ़ा बनती है. द फर्स्ट version of the film is when you finish your screenplay. That's the
Mm-hmm.
first version of the film that you have made on paper. The
Yeah.
second version of the film is when you shoot it.
Yeah.
ठीक है. And the third and the final version of the film is when you edit it.
I did it.
So
Yeah. True.
in each process, you're actually developing, and even you have the capability of changing things here and there, because on the editing table you have the freedom of really getting through to the core of the narrative and the core of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
storytelling, that what you actually want to say, कि आप कहानी बताना किस तरह चाहते हैं, कहानी का
Yeah.
ट्रीटमेंट क्या है. And that is entirely dependent on the dynamic that you have with your editor. How well do you
He
understand
gets
each
your
other's
vision. Yeah.
language?
Yeah.
Not just vision, but the language. मैं जब
Mm.
अपने editor
True.
के साथ बैठता हूँ, sometimes there are times when I'm thinking and he is doing what I'm thinking, as
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
cutting
You.
what
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking. And this is quite a rare and a very valuable professional relationship, that
Yeah.
if you build that relationship with an editor, I think it's quite amazing, because this makes a lot of things easier for you, because there is a lot of shorthand that is going on while you're editing the film, and there are a lot of things that you want to, because आप जब एडिटर के साथ बैठे होते हैं और चीज़ें कट रही होती हैं, तो आपका दिमाग बहुत तेज़ी से चल रहा होता है.
Yeah.
और कई दफ़ा अगर आपका एडिटर इतना स्किल्ड नहीं है और उसका हाथ उतना तेजी से नहीं चल रहा जितनी तेजी से आपकी सोच चल रही है,
Mm.
तो देयर इज
Mm-hmm.
अ लॉट ऑफ back and forth that goes
Yeah.
on in the editing room, and it can add up to a lot of frustration as well. So
Yeah.
I completely understood when he said that, Dennis in an interview said that I cannot edit until unless we're in the same room together. And I will never edit a film without. I'm really forgetting the name of the editor. He's a
I
brilliant
think some
editor.
Walker something.
I think so. I think so. I think I
Uh,
have to look it up. And
yeah.
so
Joe
because my
Walker.
Joe Walker, yeah, and I think my lack of sleep is now kicking in. Probably that's getting his name. So, Khair, it's a brilliant interview. Anyone who wants to know more about the
Mm.
editing treatment of Dune, they should definitely watch it. And anyone who is just basically interested in how the process of telling a story as complicated as Dune, I mean, how is it treated in the editing room? They should also look it up,
I will do. Yeah.
and it gives you a very deep insight into how this process works. So
That's
that
amazing. No,
was
I'll
quite interesting.
definitely gonna watch that for sure.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, another thing that I like before we finish this podcast, there was something that I wanted to ask you, like as you know, since you also do cinematography, like I wanted to talk about the cinematography of the film as well. Like I think
My,
the previous few films were done by Denny's films were done by Roger Deakins, right?
yeah,
And this time he moved to Greg Fraser, who's
yeah.
also won awards or Emmys for The Mandalorian, and he's also the cinematographer for the upcoming Batman film. So,
Hmm,
what
hmm.
did you think about his um, cinematography? Like, how well did you think he captured? Because I thought, like, definitely, I think the color palette for this film was a bit toned down from, I guess, the previous work of Denny. So
Hmm, hmm.
just wanted to get insight on that from you. Like, what did you think about the color palette and just the cinematography on its own, basically?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the cinematography is beautiful. It's it's very, in a way, it's very narrative driven cinematography,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not just beauty for the sake of beauty. It's
Mm-hmm.
very, if I, for lack of a better word, it's a very functional approach to visual narrative, that you're focusing on showing things that are important for the story to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is something that has been conveyed beautifully. Obviously, it's shot on an epic scale.
Oh, yeah.
I think they used IMAX cameras for specific
Mm-hmm.
shots, and I
And
think for
I
the
think
rest,
for the first time he also used like multiple camera units. He's never done that
yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. And I was watching the making of the film, and I think for a couple of shots that were on Steadicam, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was Alexa XT or Alexa 65, which is, I
yeah.
think, large
I
format
mm-hmm. I think it
sensor.
was the 65, yeah.
Yeah, 65. I think it was 65,
Mm-hmm.
and that is a large format cinema camera, which gives you obviously a much bigger resolution frame, which if you're shooting alongside IMAX, it sort of gives you that leverage of at least on a bigger format, that you
Mm-hmm.
can show much more, that is capable of cameras that are not capable of shooting in that format.
Format, yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I absolutely loved the cinematography,
Yeah,
because majority of the narrative is being driven by the visual,
yeah,
and
for sure. For
the color palette, like you mentioned, it's on much more on the warmer tones towards the
Yeah, which
yellows.
makes sense.
Yeah, which makes
Considering,
sense because
yeah.
they're in a desert, and
Mm-hmm.
but before that, it's the color palette is almost slightly cooler, if
Mm-hmm.
not neutral, when they're on Caladan,
Yeah,
and each planet has a very distinct color palette.
color
The
palette.
Harkonnen
Mm-hmm.
is mostly blacks and grays, and it's uh,
Yeah, it's just
very
this
dark
whole
color palette.
combination of the visuals and the music and everything. It just comes together so beautifully. I think that's the best thing about this film, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also, the cinematography is also complemented by a very organic production design, because
Yes. Yeah.
you don't see a lot of very alien looking
Yeah. Yeah.
environments. You see environments that are very native to planet Earth.
Exactly.
Even
It's very
Joe,
Earth-like. Yeah.
it's very raw and it's very real looking film,
True.
which is the best
No.
thing I liked about you know Dune. That it's
Mm.
something that you do not feel that uh, you know you're being invited to a world which looks very familiar
Yeah.
to yours, but at the
It's
same time it's an alien world. It's a
yeah.
world.
Even though they're traveling intergalactic, I think we still feel like they just traveled from like Iceland to Dubai. That's
Yeah,
what it feels like. So it's yeah. It feels very Earth-like, which is great. Yeah.
yeah,
Um.
yeah. And I think he shot the uh, Caladan in Norway. Planet
Yes.
Caladan
Yes.
is,
Norway, and I think the deserts are Jordan and Dubai. I think Wadi Rum and in Abu Dhabi actually. So
mm,
those are the two deserts that where the movie
yeah,
was shot.
yeah. And I was watching Dennis's interview, that he said that he wanted to shoot most of the stuff in camera, and
Hmm.
I think that is a great approach to go, that you do not rely heavily on CGI, even
CGI,
though
yeah,
there
it
is a
was
lot of,
minimalist. Yeah.
but it's very intelligent use of CGI, whereas most of it is very invisible CGI.
Mm-hmm.
That is not
Mm-hmm.
too much attention to it. It's not drawing, it's not very obvious CGI,
Yeah.
which is something I really, really liked. And I think that's the same approach to makeup as well. Even though,
True. Mm-hmm.
there is heavy makeup in the film, especially with all the Harkonnens and, all
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm. The Baron.
soldiers,
Yeah.
the emperor, but you rarely get to see it. It's very subtle and it's very
Mm-hmm.
invisible, which is a very difficult makeup to pull off on screen.
Yeah. It looks
You know,
very organic.
yeah,
It's very, yeah.
it's very, very organic.
Mm-hmm.
And overall, I think the overall feel of the film is that you're inviting the viewers to this world, which seems very familiar, but at the same time, it's it's not what you know of. So
Yeah.
that is
That's,
something that I really enjoyed, and I'm really, really looking forward to the second part of the film.
yeah. Same
And
here. Same here. It's definitely caught my attention. Like as I said, as the credits rolled, I was like ready for part two. To be honest, I was like, give it to me. But yeah, it was
yeah,
so well done, and definitely looking forward. I think it's supposed to release in 2023, so not too far
yeah,
away.
not too
And
far away.
yeah,
And I've also started reading the book, and I'm also actually excited to read the book. And actually, this is the first time a film has instigated me to read a book. Otherwise, usually,
it's the other way around.
the
Yeah,
film it's the other way around. They do not live up to the excellence of the book.
excellent. Yeah, of the book. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I think the other movie that made me do that was The Exorcist.
Hmm. Hmm.
I
Hmm.
watched the film first, and then I went down and read the book. So yeah,
How's
but
the book?
yeah. Hmm?
How's the book, The Exorcist?
Oh, it's really good. It's yeah, it's amazing. It's definitely
Okay.
worth the read, like especially if you've seen the film. Yeah, you would love the book. Of course, as you said, the book always has more to it. You can only capture so much within the time limit of a movie. But
Yeah.
yeah, the book was amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And before we wrap it up, I just want to say that I know there are a lot of people who might be, who will be listening to this episode that, there are a lot of differences between the book and the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, you cannot wrap up such huge fantasy landscape in, even though by conventional standards, Dune is a pretty, long film. I think
Yeah,
2 घंटे की film है ये.
yeah, it's a long film.
So
Mhm.
it's a long film, which is for a studio film of this budget, it's quite unconventional.
Yeah.
But I think Denis Villeneuve did a brilliant job. He knew that he could not, uh, you know, uh, put all of whatever is in the book, but whoever has read the books and watched the film, they all say that he has done justice to what was the important part of the book and the story.
Mm.
So I think that is something also worth mentioning, that even though you cannot put everything into the film, but the stuff that he did manage to put into the film was done very you know it's very near to the vision of
Yeah,
Frank Herbert.
Frank Herbert.
Yeah,
Yeah, that I agreed. Yeah, this was uh, much needed discussion for sure. I know you've been wanting to do this too, and I was really excited, and
man, and
I'm glad we did
yeah,
this.
I'm very yeah, yeah, same here, and I think we should do more of it now that
Absolutely.
I
It's not gonna be a year this
relatively.
time.
No, 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 definitely not going to be a year. And in fact, if we pick it up regularly, hopefully the next time we do it, I'm not exhausted, and
Yeah,
we
no,
can do a video call, and
absolutely.
something that I would like to make a regular occurrence, because it's always a pleasure talking to you, and
Same here, same
thank you
here.
for having the show,
Absolutely,
and looking forward to more of this. And
absolutely.
anyone who hasn't seen the film, Please watch the
Do watch
film.
it.
It's still
In
running
theaters,
in
yeah.
Pakistan, in theaters, wherever you are, and because it's not a film that you want to watch on your television.
Hmm.
Uh, it's meant to be seen in cinemas. It's meant to be seen on a bigger screen with proper sound system, and it's the film that actually initiated the revival of bringing people back to cinema
Yeah,
post
post pandemic.
lockdown, all
Hmm.
over the world post pandemic, and whoever is listening, please watch the film in cinema.
Absolutely agreed.
You won't regret
Yeah.
it.
Yes. But yeah, we'll definitely be talking about more stuff. I know there's quite a few good films coming out soon, so we'll definitely hop back on for all that. But thank you so much again
My
for taking
pleasure.
up the time, and this was a lot of fun. And I hope the listeners have a great time listening to, yeah, just go on about this amazing film. And until next time, take care.
Take care.